Welcome to this edition of American Purpose. My name is Jack Moline, and I am president of Interfaith Alliance. 60 years ago, Henry Luce, publisher of Life magazine, invited 10 prominent men, each to compose an essay on the national purpose. Then as now, there was a sense that we stood at the beginning of a time of cultural and political change. Our project expands on this work as each episode explores one perspective on where our nation was, where it is, and where it should be heading, with a contemporary thought leader. My guests are from the worlds of faith, government, politics, and culture, and they have generously agreed to share this time with us. You can find out more about Interfaith Alliance and our mission to protect your faith and freedom at interfaithalliance.org, and by listening to our radio program and podcast, State of Belief, at stateofbelief.com. But right now, let's find out more about the American Purpose with my guest, Hemant Mehta, who is known as the Friendly Atheist. He has a long history as an activist and educator and broadcaster, and went to, as a graduate of Northwestern University, I can say, the second best university in the Chicago area. Welcome, Hemant.
Hey, Jack. Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to just dive right in here and ask, in your opinion, what was the original national purpose of the United States of America?
I know you're going to ask me that. I knew you were going to ask me that. And I was struggling for a while now. I was trying to think of a good short answer to this, and I don't know that I could give it to you still today, because I don't know that there's any single answer. I mean, part of me wants to say the freedom to pursue your goals, your dreams, your beliefs, and yet that was deprived of so many people when the country began. So it seems like an unfair way to answer that. I can tell you that one of the things that I feel like I'm fighting for, and I know you're fighting for it too, is at least the ability to believe what you want when it comes to supernatural ideas, without facing any sort of persecution or discrimination for it. And I know that's the sort of thing that drives me. I feel like that's a specific niche where I might be able to do some good in at least getting people to think a certain way. But the cool thing is everyone has their own kind of answer and their own area in which to aim for that goal from.
So that's a terrific answer, and it makes a distinction between what seemed to be in our founders' heads and what actually wound up being their actions.
Yeah, theory and practice are very different when it comes to the Constitution and the ideals we keep hearing about, when in class.
So that's a great segue, because now I want to know what you believe ought to be the American purpose going forward.
I don't know if you get the sense of this at Interfaith Alliance. I feel like so much of the work that you all do, that the atheist groups I know do, it seems to be a lot of defense, where we want people to have the freedom to pursue their life's dreams without persecution, without discrimination. And it seems like so much of what we have to do is just trying to stop acts of discrimination so that people can do whatever it is they want to do. So in terms of pursuing your dreams, your goals, it seems like there are always so many barriers to overcome. And right now, it feels like, what should our purpose be? Our purpose should be to get rid of those hurdles as much as we can, because quite frankly, I don't feel like it's in my interest to say what your goal should be or what a different group's position ought to be. But I do think that there are obstacles we all face that we shouldn't have in our way. It's a different discussion than the one I want to have, but it's one we can't avoid, because there are too many people who can't even get to the bare minimum of being able to pursue their dreams because of arbitrary reasons that I feel we could easily eliminate.
You're talking both about individual obstacles that people have and obstacles that face certain subgroups of our population rather than population as a whole. Is there a purpose that all of us Americans can get behind and push at as one people, or are we really sort of atomized in what we need to be doing?
I mean, I feel one thing we can all share is leaving the world a better place than we founded it, making this life as good as we can make it, and helping others achieve that. I mean, I feel like that's a goal of a lot of non-religious humanists. That's the goal of a lot of faith groups as well, regardless of what you think is going to happen in the afterlife or something. And I feel like all the stated goals of all of those groups, religious, non-religious, I mean, even politically, no matter how you want to label it, that's kind of the goal. We want to leave everything a better place. And we can have debates about what's the best way to achieve that. And again, this is kind of where I get back to, I would love to have that debate. But practically speaking, I don't know that we can have that debate because there are so many other things in our way to have that.
You need a safe place to have those conversations.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons you and I are having this conversation right now.
Right.
So listen, our society rests on foundational values. Some of them are admirable and others not so much. What are one or two values that are worth doubling down on in our society?
I mean, in terms of the place where I'm coming from, I think religious freedom is important, and the freedom to pursue your life without hurting other people. That is one that, I mean, the mythology of our country, that is a thing we were founded upon, even if all people weren't free. And that's something we could genuinely, strive toward in a bipartisan way too, right? We want to allow people to pursue their dreams. That seems like it shouldn't be up for debate. And yet it feels like it constantly is. But that's something I think was right there from the beginning of when our nation was founded. And it's something every activist nonprofit group I know today is fighting for, the ability to just live your life in a way that makes you happy. And unfortunately, there are always people who, for whatever their motives are, they are trying to stop you from doing that.
So, what are one or two of the values that are holding us back from that necessary progress?
I think there are people who are just motivated. I am hesitant to say they have good intentions, even if it doesn't play out that way, because I don't know that their intentions are good. But because whether it's their religion or their politics or what have you, they think certain people shouldn't be able to have the rights to pursue whatever it is they want to pursue, have a certain job, be able to shop where other people shop. And it's because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, or because they belong to a different religious group or something like that. Those are things that are getting in the way. What was the exact question? I want to try to make sure I answer it.
What are a couple of the values, our foundational values as a society, that are holding us back from pursuing what ought to be our national purpose?
It's very easy to twist those founding notions into whatever partisan, political, and I don't mean that like Democrat, Republican, but to twist it into whatever you want it to believe. I mean, you can make an argument that, we want religious freedom, and that gives me the right to stop someone else from getting a certain job or shopping at a certain place, which I would have a serious problem with. And so the thing is, that's based off of the argument they use in court, those conservative religious groups, is this is just an outgrowth of my religious freedom. And it's like, well, yeah, religious freedom is a good thing. The way you are using it seems contrary to other goals we have as a nation in terms of freedom and the ability to live without discrimination. So again, if you go back to, is religious freedom a good thing? Yes, it is. How are people using it? A lot of groups seem to be using it in really harmful ways.
Well, we're gonna look at religious freedom now for just a minute. Most of our constitutional guarantees emphasize our commonality.
Yeah.
But that first freedom in the Bill of Rights is very personal. I like to call it freedom of conscience, but there's no question that it's called freedom of religion in the Constitution itself. So what values in your personal belief system do you commend to those who don't share your beliefs and who therefore have to consider what it means to honor your religious freedom?
I feel like the main thing, there's no holy book for me. There's no one thing that necessarily binds atheists altogether. But I think one thing you would find that a lot of us have in common is the goal of making this world a better place, leaving it better than the way we founded it. And that is a driving force for pretty much every atheist, certainly the activists I've met in my little part of the world. That's a driving force. And I feel like that's not a thing that makes a lot of people upset. You know, if you find anything out about atheists and that's a thing you learn about them, that's not going to upset even the most conservative Christians or Muslims or anyone. And that's the thing, like, you don't need a higher power per se to pursue that. It's a matter of how you are going to pursue it. But like, that doesn't strike me as you need God to be good. And so I feel like that's the thing I would argue, not argue, but that's the thing I would push to others, which is you can do good in this world. You can be driven by the goal to make this world a better place. And it's not dependent on being part of a certain religion or believing a certain thing. And that is a pretty shared universal value. That's certainly one that I think a lot of atheist humanists tend to share.
I've heard you say any number of times something along the lines of, left to our own devices, most people will want to do good.
Yeah, I think that is that's a fair thing to say. Most people are trying to, if not, I don't think most people set out to hurt other people. Sometimes we make it really easy to be able to do that. But yeah, like they generally want to do good, whether it's for their family, whether it's for selfish reasons, but they're not out to hurt other people. And the debates we ought to be having is when your freedom and what you want to do to make the world a better place is directly conflicting with someone else's ability to do the same thing. That should be kind of the focus of our debates. But in general, yeah, I think that's the thing I would argue, which is I think there is only this life. I don't think there's an afterlife. And because of that, I'm driven to do as much as I can now. And that means helping other people. That makes me genuinely happy. That's a noble pursuit of this life too. And it's not driven by some supernatural motivation. It's not driven by what I want to do in the afterlife. It's not driven because I feel there was a voice in my head or a book telling me I ought to do that. And I would hope people could see that and say, oh, that is different than the stereotype I heard about atheists and in the past or something.
My experience in dealing with lots of different faith traditions, including my own, is that there's a presumption that if everything is, we have a word in Hebrew, hefker, which sort of means up for grabs, that if there's no authority telling you not to do the wrong thing, that you don't have any idea how to behave correctly.
Right.
And that is what's behind a lot of people saying, well, I'm not so sure I want to give everybody complete freedom, because if we do that, then the value I hold dearest, which is being righteous in the eyes of whatever system I subscribe to, is going to be frustrated by all those people who don't agree with me.
And you know what's really interesting about that is such a great philosophical question of, if no one believed in anything, any sort of higher power looking down upon them or anything, what would the world kind of look like if we were left to our own devices? And yet, I feel that as a blogger, as someone who talks about this stuff constantly, I haven't had to have that debate in a really long time. And the reason is, it is so easy to point to people who are doing objectively harmful things in the name of their religion. And it's not confined to one group of people or one religion. And obviously there are religious people who do plenty of good. I'm not denying that. But yeah, it's been really easy to say, look, maybe we could debate what we would do if left to our own devices. But let's look at what happens when certain religious people, conservative religious people, have lots of power. Look what they're doing with it. Look at what they're ignoring in their own camps. And don't tell me that's better. So, if we're left to our own devices, I'm sure things would go wrong in certain ways. But it's not like everything is suddenly magical and better in places where, everyone happens to be religious either. That doesn't work exactly.
If everybody were without religion, we'd all look like John Lennon.
Which, you know what? I'll take it. But
No kidding.
Yeah.
Hemant, how should our society pursue our national purpose?
I I feel like utilitarianism is not a bad goal. The idea that we should pursue justice and freedom for as many people as possible while doing as little harm as we can. And to me, a lot of the ways we do that, rectifying some of the mistakes we've made in the past, making sure groups that are historically oppressed and currently oppressed don't have those obstacles in the way. And you know what? If they need a boost because they've been denied that for a long time, let's help them out. I don't think those are contrary to ideas of freedom and equality that I think everyone would get behind. But part of it is also making sure people are aware of what has happened. I feel like one of the challenges we face right now is we have to battle a very whitewashed version of our history. And that makes it a lot harder to pursue a lot of those goals because we are not starting from the same place. And trying to educate people about that is just a constant mission of so many different groups.
And particularly when one or more of those groups has an omission that they think needs to be filled in, we sometimes get to this competition of suffering that serves nobody's purpose.
Yeah, the constant battle over who's really being persecuted. And it's always the group that tends to have the most power. I don't know if you get this feeling every time I hear people talking about how they're being persecuted for their religion or what have you. Part of me always wants to say to those people, tell me which group you want to switch places with. Because I don't know, like, who you think has more power than you do right now, or more ability, or more freedom, or what have you.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to steal it and use it.
I've heard that with politics too. I've heard this from the people I would call Christian nationalists, conservative Christians in power, where they're like, Christians are discriminated against in office. And I'm saying this as an atheist. It's like, do you know how many of you there are versus how many of me there are? If you think Christians have it rough in politics, or open Christians who talk about their faith, like, which group do you think does that more than you do? I'm happy to switch positions, by the way.
And if we're to believe recent polling, you may very well soon.
Yeah, right. It's so funny, the discrepancy between the percentage of non-religious people in America, unaffiliated people in America, versus the representation we have in elected office. It's such a wide gap.
Tell me, how should the individual pursue our national purpose? It's one thing to say as a society we need to come together on this, that, or the other. But what role do you and I and each of our viewers have to play in pursuing our national purpose?
I'm someone who's coming from a pretty privileged place where my needs are basically taken care of, and I have the luxury to kind of write about the things I want to write about, talk about the things I want to talk about. And I do feel an obligation to kind of speak out on behalf of people who don't have that same luxury that I do, at least when it comes to the areas like religion and politics, where, I'm certainly passionate about it. But also, look, there are people who don't get the chance to talk about this stuff and work with people or groups that pursue these issues because they have kids to take care of, because they have jobs that are demanding. And that's a hard situation to be in. But for those of us who are really passionate about this stuff and have made it our life's work, I think one of the things that would be meaningful for me, and I've tried to make it a part of what I do, is speaking up on behalf of people who may not have that ability to. And that's a way for me to pursue that as well. Like, I have the freedom to talk and talk about these issues that matter to me. So let's talk about it, and let's speak on behalf of the people who may care passionately but don't have the same microphones that we do. And so, this is a general idea, which is not everyone can always pursue everything they want to pursue. But for those of us who work in this type of activist-y or political type of world, for those of us who have the ability to pick and choose what we are focusing on, let's try to help those who don't necessarily have that voice. Let's speak up for those with less power and less ability to do that sort of thing. And that is, why would you want power if you can't do that?
Right.
Why would you want money if you can't have it on behalf of helping other people? It seems like such a waste.
So I'm going to, before I get to our scheduled last question, I want to throw you a little bit of a curveball. And
okay.
I don't know if you've ever been asked this before. You were not born into an atheist tradition. Mm-hmm. You were born into probably what is one of the only traditions that is smaller than the number of proclaimed atheists in this country, and that's the Jain tradition.
That's right, yeah.
Do you see a difference from the perspective you remember when you were in the Jain community to the perspective you're in the atheist community now about freedom of conscience and religious freedom?
So I'll say a couple things about that. One is that my understanding of Jainism is the sort of thing you get taught when you are a child. It's not a theological or academic Jainism. It's the cultural type more than anything else. So the irony is I didn't find out until after I became an atheist that Jainism wasn't even technically a theistic religion per se. Don't believe in a creator God. I mean, I didn't know those things because I grew up believing in God and all that. So it wasn't a huge leap necessarily. And here's the reason to get to your question, which is Jainism, more than anything else, if you know nothing else about the religion, it's that it pursues nonviolence. And you could define that as broadly as you wanted to. And the idea that you should not hurt other beings, other living creatures, people, animals, whatever.
A deep, deep reverence for life.
Very much so. So the jump from being a Jain who cared about that stuff to being an atheist who realizes, I mean, why wouldn't you want to help other people and take care of them? That was not a huge jump. There's a lot of things I had to work through when I became an atheist, going from believing in God to not believing in God. But in terms of philosophy, in terms of the driving forces and being a decent human being, I would like to think that was not a big leap for me. So that part definitely stayed with me. I mean, I've heard other atheists who are very much anti-religion in a lot of ways, who have said, I think maybe Sam Harris wrote this in his book, The End of Faith, where extremist religion is all bad all the time. But if we were all extreme Jains, maybe the world would be a better place. And it's just funny to kind of hear that about a religion that so few people have heard of. But I think that just goes to the point where, no, it wasn't too much of a change for me because the God stuff changed, the belief in supernatural stuff changed, but the way I lived my life did not really change. And to be honest with you, if I may get personal, I think that's part of the reason my parents have at least come to terms with it in a much more easier way, because I think their fear, like a lot of parents would if their child came out as an atheist, is how are you going to be a good person now if you don't have God in your life? And when they realized, oh, you're pretty much the same person we tried to raise you to be, it was a little easier for it to go down with them for the same reason. It's like, oh, the things we tried to teach you resulting from religion, that stuff stuck, even if the driving forces maybe have changed.
It's amazing how many different choices that children make provoke that same fear in their parents, which is then allayed when they find out everything's okay. Right. And having kids of my own now, it's like I'm more interested in what you plan to do, not necessarily what's driving you to get there. And they're a little too young for me to really get to see what they're going to become later on. But I mean, that I would think is the big hope. Like, are you a good person? Then I don't really care what it is that is driving you to be that way. Just be good. I'll tell you from a perspective at the other end of parenting that you find out what your values are when your children are independent.
That is good to know. Yeah. I don't doubt that for a second.
Here's the last question, Hemant. Are you optimistic about America's future?
Yes, but it's a big qualified giant asterisk. Yes. And here's why I would say that. The things that I tend to fight for more than anything else, the issues of politics and religion that drive me, it does like I said at the beginning, I feel like I'm always on the side of defense, where we're always trying to push back against like religious overreach at times on these issues that I care about. But here's why I'm optimistic about it. I mean, if you look at surveys alone, it looks like the side that says we've seen what religious people do in power tend to be conservative religious people in power, and we don't like that. We don't want anything to do with that. They're not suddenly becoming atheists necessarily, but they kind of see the harm that religion could cause in the wrong hands, per se. So on that argument, I feel like things are moving in the direction I want them to move. This is something I know your group has been particularly interested in for many years, which is, we're not having theological battles in terms of, this religious group is bad or that religious group is bad. I've noticed that among the atheist groups I work closely with, they have no problem doing interfaith work. They have no problem working with religious allies, because I think we all know we have common goals that we can all get together on. And in the past, honestly, I would not have seen that cooperation. So I'm optimistic about that. And overall, I think the tide is turning in terms of getting people conscious of the big issues that we face. And while I think we are in the majority, I think the minority is very powerful in the sense that they stick together, they take this stuff seriously. Whereas even though there's more of us, we have to do more work getting people interested and active about this stuff. But there are more of us. And so I think in terms of making sure we live in this free, equitable, non-discriminatory type of country, we are moving in that direction. And the work we have to do is to get unmotivated people active and interested. And that's I'm not going to say easy. It's not easy. That is a doable job. That is a thing we can all work toward. It would be a lot harder if we were a smaller group of people trying to get them to change their minds. That is a hard thing to do, but we're not doing that. It's a matter of telling people, I know you care about this stuff. I know you feel the way I do. I just need you to do a few steps. I need you to vote. I need you to run for office. I need you to do these basic things, or donate, or do whatever you can in your capacity. That is an easier sell than I need you to change your mind entirely. And I feel like my side is getting better at making that happen. That sort of activism is being done. Now, there's a big hump we have to overcome to get there. There always are. But I feel like that is moving in that direction. It's just going to take time to get there. That whole saying about the arc of justice, moral arc of the universe sort of thing. It's not a foregone conclusion, but it's possible. We just need to do the work to get there. So I'm optimistic in that regard. I don't think it's all defeatist. I don't think it all has to turn out a certain bad way, but there is work to be done.
I think that's the most practical optimism that's ever been expressed in this series that we've been doing.
Good.
Listen, I can't thank you enough for doing this, and thanks to our listeners for engaging with us and exploring the American purpose. It's been an honor and a pleasure to spend this time with Hemant Mehta, who has shared his perspective so generously. And you can hear more from him on his podcast, The Friendly Atheist. Don't overlook the opportunity to do that. You can listen to this and other episodes of American Purpose at americanpurpose.org, and learn more about our work at stateofbelief.com and at interfaithalliance.org. Interfaith Alliance has produced this program under the guidance of Ray Kirstein. I am Jack Moline, encouraging you to live with purpose.